So first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Eric Drever. I am the Chief of Police for the Tukwila Police Department. I know probably the majority of the people that I see their names here as participants, which I really appreciate the support as we move forward for the police department and our efforts for making this a safe community for Tukwila. So back on April 1st, the mayor gave me the permanent appointment to chief of police after doing a national search. And out of that appointment, he charged me with making sure that our community's needs are met. And part of that began before I was given the appointment. We weren't going to wait until a decision was made. As soon as the prior chief, Linton, had retired and I was given the interim job, we worked together as administration, knowing that we had several issues related to police reform coming before the session in January. We started making adjustments to see what we could do to better serve the community long before any of the legislative measures came to final decisions in the House. So tonight, we're going to talk about some of the activities that the police department has been involved in, some of our community engagement, but more importantly, how some of that engagement around the nation, as well as locally, has led to police reform and some of the legislative laws that have come out of the recent legislative session. So to begin with, what I'd like to throw out is a little bit of our philosophy on community engagement. We truly believe that in order to have a productive, valuable engagement with our community, we have to first have in place transparency and accountability, because we can engage with you, we can talk with you, we can visit with you, we can help problem solve with you. However, if you don't believe what we're doing, if you don't have faith in your police department because you aren't familiar with us, you don't know what our processes are, you're just not going to trust us. So we have always been an open book as it relates to what we do here at the Tukwila Police Department. However, some of the things we haven't done is made more available to the public how we go about doing things. How do we make decisions? So beginning with transparency, we're looking for ways to involve the community and get our processes and our decision making out there. So some of the things we've done to create that transparency begins with, back in the fall, we created a use of force review board that then was put into place and took its first review of all of our use of force by the department, every single one of them. And the use of force review board reviews all of the use of force and then puts forward a report to the chief's office for information that can be used to improve our department in our training. If need be, identify areas where we need to hold officers accountable for where they didn't follow policy or outright stepped out of line, while at the same time including the community. The transparency portion of this and accountability comes with the community. So we've added community members to our use of force review board. We had 4 individuals that were selected prior for our independent investigations of officer-involved use of deadly force, which is a team that has been in existence for several years now to independently investigate officer use of deadly force. However, in January of 2020, as a result of I-940, the Law Enforcement Training and Community Safety Act was put in place that then put parameters in place that showed how we will conduct our independent investigation, which including community members as part of our investigation team as a means for some sort of review and oversight so that the community had direct access to how an investigation takes place. So our thought as an administration was to bring that same thought process to the department. And so we now have review of all of our use of force by community members. The panel consists of use of force experts, some of our defensive tactics instructors, administrators, so that we have policy experts, and then our community members. So the panel is half community members, and they go over every single use of force. And although we don't have time for it now, I would refer you back to the last two CSS Council Commission Community Safety Committee meetings, where they went over exactly what the Use of Force Board did and the accolades that the community representatives provided. Keeping in mind that there was a process in place for selecting those community members so that we have an objective panel of individuals that are actually impacted and have experiences with police use of force. So we want to bring that same panel or same thought process on adding community into having access to how we do things and having review and a say to other processes as well. So right now I've been working with the Equity and Social Justice Committee to put together a process for vetting additional community members, to put a roster together to have community members sit in on our hiring processes. So we have a civil service board and rules that govern how we go about hiring law enforcement. Everybody that works for the police department is governed by the civil service rules, with the exception of the deputy chief and the chief's position, who are at-will employees that work for the mayor. Everyone else, including all of our non-commissioned staff, our specialists, our records personnel, our advocates, our emergency manager, all go through civil service, in which case, what that means, it's a set of rules that dictates how we go about selecting people. And part of that process is an interview process that then creates a ranking list that is given to the chief, and the chief then has his choice of 5 people that he can interview from the top of that list. And he then interviews the top 5. And so we want to include people to create that error or to create transparency in the interview process that creates the list. And then we want to also include community members sitting in with the chief as we interview the staff that we're going to be hiring. And so we can involve the community in the actual future of what law enforcement will look like here in Tukwila. So I'm currently working with the Equity and Social Justice Committee representatives to see what we can do to vet people and put that process in place. In the meantime, we are utilizing community members that sit as commission members on both COPTAB, our Community-Oriented Policing Citizen Advisory Board, and also the community members that sit in on our Equity and Social Justice Committee, and have them help us with our interviews until we establish that roster of community members. In addition to the transparency, that we're always looking for new ways for us to try and create that transparency for the community so that they're aware of what is going on. I mean, Vic Masters, our PIO, has done a fantastic job with our social media. For those of you that have been following on Facebook, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but that's a means for us to provide transparency. Community forums like this. We're working with the Community-Oriented Policing Citizen Advisory Board to put out a survey to the community as it relates to policing services and how we can best serve you. All of these are ways for us to create transparency and, more importantly, get feedback from the community as to how we can best meet your needs. After transparency comes accountability. Putting into processes into place so that we, the police department, hold ourselves accountable, finding ways for the community to hold us accountable. That's one area we have for accountability that's been in place for decades, is civil service. The state mandates civil service, and we've had a civil service board that has oversight as to all of our hiring practices for the police department, all of our promotional practices for the police department, so that there's an objective way for us to rank and make selections as we go through all of our hiring and promotions. We are currently we're in the process of accrediting, certifying ourselves as being accredited through WASPIC. And we are set on pace for, I believe, in about 2 months to go through a mock assessment of all of the processes we've had to go through to set ourselves up for the standards of accreditation. And then in the fall, we will go before WASPIC and present all of our materials that show that we are in compliance with accreditation in order for us to then be an accredited agency. And what accreditation is it is an accepted best practices for law enforcement. So it means we meet certain standards, that we are doing things in the way that it is accepted as best practice for law enforcement, which is changing every day. However, the standards are constantly updated, and we would then be required to make sure we're meeting that standard in order for us to be considered an accredited agency. We're also looking at training with the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, bringing in active bystandership for law enforcement. And what that is, it's an accountability training program that creates a culture of intervention. Our department already has policy about officers intervening with other officers if they see things that are outside of policy and or are excessive when it comes to use of force. However, some of the new legislation, which we're going to get to in a minute, actually dictates how we will go about intervening and what having policies in place. This training program actually creates a culture of that, so it is beneficial to the officers. It creates safety for the officers, it creates safety for the community, and it is a means for holding the department itself accountable. So the biggest piece of accountability comes straight from the community. And that's with the most recent legislative session. We've had numerous House bills that have been passed that directly impact law enforcement and our operations. And I would imagine if anybody that's been watching the news over the last couple months is familiar with most of these measures. I wanted to run down them real quick, just so that we can educate the group as to the different types of bills that have been put in place that are going to change how we work operationally. We're not going to go into the weeds on them. We'll be able to answer in Q&As questions if people have questions. But next week, we'll be looking to take those, all of those bills, and we'll have them posted on our website so that they're available for you to read on your own and truly get down into the weeds as to what the intent behind the bills are. So most of these bills are set to take effect and will be law on July 25th, in which case we need to change our policies prior to that, implement them, and train our officers so that they're following them. So we've got a tight time crunch, but that's going to be our focus over the next couple of weeks to make sure that we are compliant, not only with the law, but the intent behind the law, because most of the measures that have been provided in these laws are going to be greatly beneficial to both the community and the department as it relates to our transparency and accountability. So with that, I'm going to dive into what some of these measures are. So first, beginning with House Bill 1054. This is a House bill put forward regarding tactics for law enforcement. Some of the items, and again, I'm not going to cover everything. I'm going to cover some of the ones that have been controversial topics, as well as things that are going to directly have an immediate impact on how we do operations. First of all, chokeholds, neck restraints of any kind are going to be prohibited come July 21st. We already have policy that restricts them, but this is now in effect. The only thing that is changed is language for us that it can't be used in any circumstance. No-knock warrants are no longer allowed. A no-knock warrant means that we don't announce, we don't identify ourselves as police until we're actually making entry upon having a warrant. In this case, the new law will require us to knock and announce and wait a period of time, providing reasonable amount of time for somebody to come and answer the door before we make entry. Of particular note, we participate with the Valley SWAT team. We have members of our department on that team, and we haven't served a no-knock warrant in the longest time. I can't even remember when the last time we did. We do knock and announce as it is, and this new law is just bringing the rest of the area into compliance. Prior to deploying of tear gas, law enforcement agencies are now required to get authorization from the highest elected official. In Tukwila's case, it's the mayor. So prior to deploying any tear gas, we'll be restricted from using it unless we get that authorization from the mayor. So Mayor, just so you're aware, we're going to put some training in place for you and get you trained up so that you're educated prior to any incident of us hopefully not even having to ask you, but when we do come to ask, making sure that you are educated and prepared to make an informed decision. The new bill 1054 also prohibits the use or acquisition of military equipment. The Tukwila Police Department right now does not have anything that falls under the definition of military equipment. However, we will not be seeking any military equipment and will not be using it. Officers are required to reasonably identify themselves, so they must have some sort of identifier on their uniform, plainly visible, so that you can identify who they are, whether it's a badge number, whether it's a name. That's now a requirement. We've always required that. Furthermore, our officers are instructed to make sure that they provide name and information if somebody asks. Vehicular pursuits are going to be prohibited except in the extent of having probable cause of a violent crime or sex offense, as well as reasonable suspicion for driving under the influence. So DUIs will also be allowed for pursuing. Tukwila already has a restrictive pursuit policy. However, this will refine it a little bit more, especially requiring us to have probable cause before we can pursue. And then the new law also prohibits us from firing weapons at moving vehicles. So House Bill 1310 on use of force. So use of force under this bill will only be allowed to be applied if an officer has probable cause that a crime has been committed. It only allows a law enforcement officer to use deadly force when absolutely necessary to protect against an imminent threat or serious physical injury or death. And it requires officers to exhaust available and appropriate de-escalation tactics prior to using any physical force. Then once using physical force, the least amount of physical force necessary to overcome resistance under the circumstances. And we must terminate the use of physical force as soon as the necessity for such force ends. All of these things are already incorporated into our policy. Excuse me, the need to terminate the physical force as soon as it's no longer necessary as part of our policy. We will be adding policy as it relates to the needing probable cause before engaging in use of force. Senate Bill 5051 regarding decertification. This is through the Criminal Justice Training Commission, which establishes criteria for mandatory decertification of a peace officer and or correction officer. So decertification would take away our ability to act as law enforcement. So we would not be able to hold a job if we did some act that then required this Criminal Justice Training Commission to decertify us. So that is what that law is aimed at. The Criminal Justice Training Commission is given authority to conduct investigations into allegations of improper conduct. They did not have that authority before. It is giving them some authority to conduct their own investigations outside a police department. And it also expands the requirements relating to pre-hire background checks. Senate Bill 5066 with duty to intervene. And we already talked about this a little bit, but it requires any identifiable general authority in Washington who's a law enforcement officer who witnesses another law enforcement officer using or attempting to use excessive force to intervene to end and or prevent that use of excessive force and to report that use of force to a supervisor. It also incorporates the duty to render first aid. All of this is part of our current policy. We'll be making minimal changes, just making sure that we're meeting the compliance as it relates to the new bill, but we are already currently doing that. And it also ties back into the ABLE project, where we're looking to get training that would then create that culture of intervention. House Bill 1267, the Office of Independent Investigations. This is a bill that was put forward to create an Office of Independent Investigations that responds directly to the Office of the Governor. And it designates that the Office of Independent Investigations would be the lead investigative body for any investigation into an officer-involved use of deadly force. For those that aren't familiar, I-940 put into play the Law Enforcement Training and Community Safety Act that led to how independent investigations will be investigated and how we go about doing those investigations. So Tukwila participates in the Valley Independent Investigation Team, and it was our team's policies that were used to set the standard for the rest of the state. We are considered subject matter experts on independent investigations. Tukwila and the partnering agencies involved with it, and some of our participants, some of our detectives, myself included, have helped some of the other agencies in the area set up their own independent investigation teams. So prior to this bill even coming out, we were already doing these things. And I mention this because we do our best to listen to the community, and these are the things that the communities wanted. And it's not just Tukwila. All of the Valley agencies, Tukwila, Kent, Renton, Auburn, have been participating in the independent investigations and wanting to provide that sense of accountability and transparency prior to us being mandated to do it. And so this new law, so House Bill 1267, will eventually do away with those teams. We don't know what that's going to look like. They have a multi-year plan to put that in place. But again, it's the governor's attempt at trying to add separation, not having police investigate police. And so with that, they will probably continue utilizing our independent investigatory teams until they have their own teams established and in place. And then finally, additionally, we have House Bill 1223, which is Uniform Electronic Recording of Custodial Interrogations, which now requires that any custodial interrogation of an adult for a felony offense or juvenile for any offense be electronically recorded. Now, we use body-worn cameras. We also have dash cams. So we're already set up to be in compliance with this. We'll just have to tweak our policy to make sure that we have that expectation set in policy. Whereas now it's not mandated that officers record those sessions. We usually do. It's a valuable tool, having the body cameras on us, being able to use it for that function. However, now state is mandating it, so we'll tweak our policy to make sure that we are utilizing it as it was intended. So that is a lot of information to digest. But all of these things, we are currently working with the regional chiefs and city attorneys. So I met 3 weeks ago with all of the Valley chiefs and surrounding region in South King County, along with our municipal attorneys, as we went over all of this legislative effort. And one of the things that's important, since a lot of it refers to actions officers can and can't do, is making sure that we as a region are all on the same page. So we're looking to put together uniform policy that we can all utilize and bring back to our department, so that if we should have to engage in another jurisdiction, so if Tukwila would cross jurisdictional line and go into Renton, they're only 2 minutes away, and that happens quite often. When we interact with other officers, we're all playing by the same rules. So having the same policy so we all know what to expect from one another will be beneficial for us to be able to meet the compliance of the law while at the same time taking a more unified approach. So we're working together as a region to make sure we have policy in place that will benefit the community and meet the compliance of the new law. So over the next couple of weeks, we will have that policy in place. We will put up, we will post the actual policies that are related to the reform measures that I read off. We'll post them for you so you can actually see what our policies are. And I challenge you. I ask you to challenge us. Look at those policies. Find out, compare them to what the House bills say, and make sure we're in compliance. I'm confident that we will be. However, the only way we know that we're meeting your needs is if we open ourselves up to listening. And that's a part of what this whole forum is for, is providing an opportunity for us to engage and for us to hear feedback from you as to how we can best meet your needs. So with that, I thought that we could open up some Q&A from everyone here, and I haven't had a chance to look at the chat as I've been reading off of some of my notes here. If you've got questions, let's start off with questions in the chat and see what we can do to answer your questions. Now, Chuck, I know you've got questions. I've been watching you take notes. You've got a question for me. Oh, you're on mute.
Not quite yet, Chief. I've mainly taken notes of all the bills so I can review them on my own.
And we will post all of them so that you'll have reference to them. And there are a few others too, but they're more administrative. But all of the ones we listed will have direct impact on our operations.
Thank you.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, and I know you don't want to make it that easy on me. So we have, let's see here. Let me look. We've got 24 participants. So why don't we open it up? Is there somebody that would like to ask a question on the actual Zoom via video?
I just thought of one.
Okay.
On Tukwila Talk, there have been considerable conversation about abandoned cars. How does the police department deal with that? Or is that abandoned, the police department?
That's part of our traffic function. It also becomes part of our, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, part of our public works code enforcement, I'm sorry. So it depends on where the vehicle is. If it's on the right of way of the street, if it is on common land for the municipality, traffic will take care of it. If it's abandoned vehicles on someone's property, code enforcement will take care of it. So if you've got concerns regarding abandoned vehicles, you can forward the questions or contact the police department, and we can go out and take a look, tag the vehicle. We have to allow for a certain amount of time for somebody to move their vehicle. If they don't, we can have it impounded and remove it.
Thank you.
You can also report illegal parking or abandoned vehicles online, just like you can any other crime. So that option's available as well.
And for those listening in on the phone and don't have video and can't see names, that was Deputy Chief Lund.
Deputy Chief, specifically, where would one go to do that online?
If you can remember this website, we made it, Vic made it pretty easy to remember, tukwilapdreports.com. That is one of the options. Is it comes up as illegal parking, but you can write a note in there that the car has been abandoned for weeks or whatever. And if you can get a license plate, that helps. So that is an option. If you don't feel like calling it in, you can go online and do that. It takes a little longer to report online than just making a simple call, but that option's available.
Okay, thank you for that. And Chief, while I'm thinking about it, this is being recorded. Is it going to be made available to those that cannot attend? And if so, how would they find it?
That's for a good question for Vic. Yes, we'll make it available. Vic, what can they expect as it relates to posting?
We post it on our website. We'll put a link up, and then I'll link it into Tukwila Talk as well.
Thank you, Vic. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I'm not as tech savvy, so I'm glad I've got him here to save my bacon on that one.
Vic is awesome.
Oh, he does fantastic. For those that are looking, he actually posted that in the chat. So there's a link in the chat for the TukwilAPDreports.com. Well, let's do this. Let me talk a little bit more. And at this point, this is free form, open forum. I want to make sure we address your questions. So let me go over some of the things we're doing for community engagement. So part of our community engagement efforts are with the intent of seeking input from the community. How can we best meet your needs? And so with that comes creating opportunities for us to listen. This is one example of them. But in addition to that, we're trying to work with business partners within the community. We're trying to work with neighborhoods, so neighborhood groups, not just individuals. We've been working with the Cascade View neighborhood and some speeding issues they've had there, as well as some other issues revolving some break-ins to some vehicles. So we've been working on those things individually. So as a community, if you have neighborhood issues and want to talk with us as a community, we can help you set up a block watch. We can also address your needs, not just on an individual basis, but get your neighbors involved. That creating a community that is looking after itself is essential for any law enforcement effort. It begins with the community. There was a time where I lived in an area where I only knew the individuals that were directly next door to me. And it was because other people didn't want to engage. I chose not to continue living there because that was not a community mentality for me. And so I moved into a community where I know all my neighbors in the area. Matter of fact, growing up, I could have been miles from the house and my mother would get a call from somebody, literally miles from the house, and they all knew the kids. It was a village mentality, and that's what we need to do to help keep others safe, because let's face it, law enforcement can't be everywhere all the time. I'd love it if we could and provide that type of security. Instead, it takes eyes and ears from the community. So some of the efforts that we've put together are creating opportunities for block watches, like we did we're in the middle of creating a block watch for the Cascade community. We also participate in the Teams Diversion Program, which is theft third and mall safety down at the Westfield Mall here in Tukwila, where we partner with other resources for making sure that youth that are stopped for shoplifting don't get put into the system. We look to find ways to get them the resources and work through this program so that we can divert them and get them the resources they need to prevent them from getting entered into the system. And then, you know, the domino effect of once you're in the system and the stigma that comes for anybody trying to get a job down the road and having criminal history on your record. So we've been working with the youth to keep the youth out of the system. Our school resource officers, Coffee with a Cop. We've done in about 2 months ago, I think it was, we did a Coffee with a Cop virtual event. And you were there, Chuck. And then last month we had a community engagement down at the mall itself, the first real community engagement where we invited the community to come and visit and talk with us down at the mall. Myself, several of the commanders, Vic was down there, our crime community policing team were down there, and we spent 2 hours talking with people at the mall and telling them what we do and answering their questions. We're looking to put together now that we were looking at doing a virtual community academy. However, now that we're cross fingers coming out the backside of COVID and people getting vaccinated, as we hit the fall, we're looking to put our community police academy back in place so that we can have community members come and actually go through some of our training, teach you about how and why we do things. It'd be nice to do a piece on that, and this is a hint at our PIO. We do a piece on the Community Police Academy and actually show you, so for the first time, individuals what they go through in the academy. You know, post some video, post some pictures, as well as find ways for us to include those that couldn't, because since we can only have so many people in the academy, find ways to include others as well. Our Bulldog Academy for high school students. Looking forward, hopefully cross our fingers here in August for Night Out Against Crime. We didn't hold it last year because of the pandemic. More community forums like this. Right now we're planning another community forums where we're going to reach out to the schools and try and touch base with the students. We're looking to do that again at the fall as the students are coming back to school. We've incorporated a co-responder program. We're actually right in the middle of finalizing it, and I'm hoping here by the 1st of July we should actually have somebody working side by side as a mental health professional, as a co-responder with our law enforcement officers. It's a pilot program. We only have one. We can only afford to pay for the one position. However, they're going to come and spend 40 hours a week with us. Part of it will be them riding along with us so they can immediately respond to those in mental health crisis. In addition to that, we've partnered with a grant for the region, and we have on-call capability for co-responder programs from external agencies for mental health practitioners, and we've already been utilizing them. We received the grant back in April, and it was implemented here mid-May, and we've been utilizing it already as a means for having additional resources that we can throw at incidents and individuals that need resources beyond what law enforcement can provide. Having a mental health practitioner, professional on initial contact, and then what they call navigators available to follow up afterward, making sure they're getting to their treatments, if it's dependency issues, getting to appointments if it's mental crisis issues, and following up with them. And if they've done something that has broken the law, finding diversion programs through the prosecutor's office, through the courts, to try and find a way to minimize the impact of that the mental crisis that they're having may have on legal ramifications. So again, finding ways to provide those people with the resources so that they can actively participate with the community as compared to being a detriment to it. And then we have met with our team leadership within the department, which is our sergeants and above, and we have tasked them with reaching out within their own units and their own crews, their own divisions, to come up with unique ways of creating more opportunities for our community engagement efforts so that, again, we can start building the transparency, the accountability, and ultimately, hopefully earn your trust so that when there are incidents that are unavoidable, and we tell you that they're unavoidable, that we have the trust and the community support in that. We're not perfect. If we should make a mistake, we will hold ourselves accountable, but we also expect the community to hold us accountable. But if we establish that position of trust and show transparency about how we go about do things, why we do things, I'm not saying that we would hope that the community would be forgiving, or I should say, accepting of whatever that action was, but also forgiving, knowing that there wasn't malice behind it. That there are times where we may make mistakes. However, the training that we're going through right now minimizes those mistakes. The expectations and policies that we're putting in place minimize those mistakes. Just the very use of the trainings that we put into place with de-escalation and crisis intervention and patrol tactics, which is something that was mandated via LATAXA, the Law Enforcement Training Community Safety Act, as a result of I-940. All those trainings that have been put into place over the last couple of years, we've already seen the impact of putting these trainings in place, because we dropped, and Chief Lund, correct me if I'm wrong, we went from 84 uses of force in 2019 down to 54 uses of force. It was a significant drop. We were looking at about 40% drop in use of force. And I directly correlate that to the de-escalation tactics, the professionalism of the officers involved. I referred you earlier to the CSS committee meetings for council about the presentation we did on our use of force review board. We had some of our community members who are individuals that are some of them are skeptical of law enforcement, who we purposely put them on the board in order for them to challenge us. They were impressed. Some of the comments they referred to is they were impressed with the compassion that the officers showed after a use of force. I have faith in our officers. I've seen them working firsthand, and there is nobody in this department that wants to use force on somebody. Sometimes
Have those numbers for you if you want.
Yeah,
Just
Chief,
for-
why don't you throw them out?
Yeah, just for accuracy, in 2019, we had 64 reports of use of force. And in 2020, we had 54. If you want to go back to 2016, to contrast, we had 260 use of force incidents reported. So in 2017, just a little history, is when we implemented body cameras. We've further had some additional training on use of force, de-escalation. So that all kind of are reasons why I believe that it went down, but the numbers have dropped significantly year over year.
Chief, we got a question in the comment section.
Okay.
Chief,
Yes.
the programs that you guys are instituting using citizens to fill some of the spots, how does a citizen make the department known that they might be interested in it?
So right now, the community representatives that sit in on our use of force review board, they were taken straight from our independent investigation team, where there was a community announcement and there was a whole interview and vetting process, and we added them to our independent investigation team for reviewing of use of deadly force. We then brought them into the department for use of all of our force. As it relates to those that we want to sit in on our hiring process, I am working with the Equity and Social Justice Committee. They are going to vet the applicants. The police department will post it. So working with Vic here, we will post when, where, how, anybody interested. It'll be on our website, it'll be on our social media. That anybody interested in participating at that capacity would then submit an application along with a cover letter to our Equity and Social Justice Committee. And again, we're working out the actual vetting process through the Equity and Social Justice Committee. And then we will go through an interview process that will include the Equity and Social Justice Committee to then create a roster of individuals that we would utilize for the hiring process.
Thank you.
Yep. And so in the chat, it says, at the Showwater Middle School steering together meeting today, concerns were raised that youth had voiced in a forum last year that they felt uncomfortable having an SRO assigned to a school. Why is that policy being continued, and can you change it? It's great that you're providing for mental health professional intervention. So I want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Why is that policy being continued? Does that mean, why do we still have school resource officers in the schools? Or is that, I want to make sure I understand the question. I don't see that. What is the appropriate most? Well, let me address that question this way. And if I get it wrong, please speak up and I'll try and address it. So I've been working with Dr. Herndon, the school superintendent for the school district, regarding this very issue. While Chief Linton was still here last year, we were working on the concerns that came up. And the reality is that it is a very small minority of individuals that have those concerns. And we know this because we just received, the school did a survey of students, community members, and staff related to having school resource officers in the schools. And the survey, we literally just got it this week and we are just going over it, but on its face, it shows that truly a minority of the students are only a minority of the students are concerned. When I say minority, I don't have the stats in front of me. Eric, do you remember, Chief Lund, do you remember exactly the percentage of students that had concerns based on the survey?
I can pull them up. Give me a second.
So he'll look at that. However, I'm working with Dr. Herndon to meet with the students individually. I've already met with students twice, Teams for Tukwila, as well as I've met with one of the teachers' classes. There were about 15 students in there as we talked. I want to make myself available to the high school students and the middle school students to hear directly from them as to their concerns. The greater concerns actually came outside and weren't from the students. And so we're looking into the basis behind where these concerns originate and why is there a concern for having school resource officers in the schools. So up until about a year ago, well, put into perspective, we've had school resource officers in the Tukwila schools for over 20 years. And it wasn't until this last year that this concern came up. And prior to that, it was all high fives and smiles from the students. We truly believe this is a valuable resource for the students and for law enforcement to engage with one another and truly get to know each other, so that if we should happen to have to engage with students not at the school but outside of the school, there's familiarity with law enforcement and vice versa. So we are still working with the schools on the very question that you asked. So we have not had school resource officers in school since the pandemic began, which was about the time that these issues started, or not, these concerns came up, just because schools have not been in session. And we are working with the school district prior to going back and actually putting any school resource officers back in the school. We will vet with the schools what their needs are and desires are. There right now, the school superintendent is still reviewing the surveys to find out how both the school and the police department can best serve the students' needs. So if best serving the students' needs means that we need to pull our school resource officers out of the school, we would do that. However, the survey doesn't seem to be indicating that that's truly what's in the best interest of the students. So we need to do more review on that. We still need to engage on that. I want an opportunity to talk with students, parents, and teachers, the faculty, to find out, one, how we can best serve them, but more importantly, if there are issues that have drawn these concerns, what is prompting them? What are we doing as law enforcement? More specifically, is there something that our Tukwila school resource officers have done that has led to concern? Because the department hasn't received any complaints about our school resource officers. Matter of fact, all we receive is accolades regarding them and the wonderful job they're doing interacting with the students. So we need to delve into it more so that we can answer your very question. So I'm sorry if it wasn't a direct answer, but please know we are working on it. We hear the concern, we're trying to understand it and then do what's best for the students.
I have those numbers.
Okay.
So, and the question is, how do you feel about having police officers in the school? And 85% of the students that responded, their response was neutral, good, or it's great. 13% were uncomfortable, or I'm not sure what the number 2 was, but neutral, less than neutral and uncomfortable. So pretty significant difference. So that was the statistics the chief was talking about, is one of the questions.
Yeah, and what we're finding from some of the conversations we've had with students, as recent as Thursday of this last week when we talked with teams for Tukwila, is Tukwila is an immensely diverse population, and we have refugees and immigrants from other countries where law enforcement is not to be trusted. And so you're getting some of that perception coming into the school. So my own personal opinion, and this is what I've been working out with Dr. Herndon and why I want to engage the students, would be for law enforcement to engage the individuals that have those concerns so that we can find a way so that we can build that relationship so they no longer have that fear. My hope would be that any student in any school in this country should not be fearful of a law enforcement officer being in the school. We're there to help keep them safe. We're there to help build those relationships. And again, I have only heard of stories that have been positive from the students that I've interacted with. Now, clearly, I haven't interacted with all of them, but I'm trying my best to hit a larger audience so that I can hear the concerns from the students themselves, and then we will address it appropriately. And ultimately, if the school district makes a decision as to what they want regarding law enforcement in the schools, we will honor it. But then we will look for other ways for us to interact with the students because we feel it's that important and that vital that we have that relationship built up.
Hey, Chief, can I jump in for just about half a second?
Yeah, that's Commander Boyd with the department.
Yeah, so as we did with the immigrants and refugees, the solution to quelling fears about police is to get to know the police, and that requires more interaction, not less. We had some really successful programs with not only the schools, with the SROs, with the but also with our immigrant refugee community doing the same type of work. It's really important that we integrate as a community so that people understand that the police department is part of this community, including, just like we have been with all the other parts of the community, so that we can all work together as one. So just want to throw that in there.
Outstanding, thank you. I agree wholeheartedly. Also in the chat, I see a question: what is the appropriate and most expeditious manner to report tagging around the city? Well, the most expeditious manner would be to dial 911, state that it's a non-emergency, and report to dispatch where the tagging is. You can also use our PD complaints line to send, or email to send us an email regarding what you see. Dealing with tagging is a joint effort between the police department and our public works. And some of the issues that revolve around tagging, we're limited on. For instance, if the tagging occurs on a private property, we have to be able to engage with the property owner before we can do anything. We just can't go onto somebody else's property and paint over a tagging. We have to involve the property owner. That being said, as it relates to your question, the city is aware of the tagging issue, as well as some areas in the city where there's some garbage dumping going on, in which case they've created a focal group within the staff in order to address those issues and how we can do it in the most expeditious manner. And I see both Deputy Chief Lund and Vic Masters are contributing in the chat for those that can see it. They've posted the non-emergency number, the tips line, as well as the PD complaints email for a reference.
I've got a couple of questions. I don't want to.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, well, thank you. So there, I believe, I don't have any personal knowledge that we have undocumented individuals in Tukwila, and it said that people who are not documented are concerned about calling the police because they're afraid that their status might be questioned and it might get them in further trouble. Is the police department required by any outside party or governmental entity to ask questions like that, or do you avoid that altogether?
I'm not sure that I'm following the question as it relates to, an outside entity. We have a policy of not asking about one's immigration status or citizen status, or however you want to phrase that. Our intent is to provide the help. So whether or not somebody is involved with an incident and we ask for their name and information, even if that information is given and we see information come up regarding immigration status, unless it is an actual warrant signed by a judge, which implies that they have committed a crime, unless it's a warrant signed by a judge, we don't act on it. Our intent is to provide service to the individual who's calling and needs our help. And so we don't investigate further as to whether or not somebody's immigration status is whether or not they're here legally in the country or not.
Does that include, I think, what's called administrative warrants, which does not have to do with committing a crime?
Well, an administrative warrant would not trigger action on behalf of the department. So this is where some of the confusion from several years ago came into place. There was an administrative warrant through our dispatching. The dispatcher mentioned that there was a warrant in the system. They asked him to confirm. The officers, unless you read through it with a fine-tooth comb, you wouldn't have even identified it as not being a warrant issued by a judge. So we've changed our practices and policies as to how we read the warrants and how we react to them. And an administrative warrant wouldn't trigger anything. It would have to be an arrest warrant signed by a judge.
And real quick, the difference is those administrative warrants, they're signed by a federal agent versus a judge. And so a lot of the states and Supreme Courts have ruled that they don't have that same level of probable cause that was reviewed by that third-party judge, but they're still entered into the same database. So even if we run somebody's name and information, they're still going to pop up because they're still entered into that criminal database, which is accessible to law enforcement nationwide.
Gotcha. And then another question is about car chases. Is there anything that you're limited in what you can do that you could do before? And if so, does that actually encourage people to try to escape by driving quickly with their car away?
Well, I think the answer to that is more complex than we probably have time for. However, the answer probably is yes. It would probably, the new legislation is more restrictive for us, and we need probable cause in order to be able to pursue somebody. So we already have a very restrictive pursuit policy. So if an officer were to pull somebody over for speeding, if they were to take off and not stop, we wouldn't pursue for that. It's an infraction, and we're not going to risk, the risk of pursuing is too high to pursue for an infraction or even a misdemeanor, unless in our prior policy would allow for assault for DV. However, we're going to be restricted now and not be able to pursue unless we actually have probable cause and know that the individual that is driving is the person that is wanted on that probable cause.
Thank you.
With the exception of DUI, if we have reasonable suspicion that somebody is driving under the influence, we can pursue on that. But even that is going to be weighing the risk versus reward on that. So if it's in the middle of high traffic time, we're just not going to pursue somebody on that.
Thank you. That's a tough one.
Yeah. And again, Deputy Chief Lund has posted our actual current policy related to that in the chat box. For those that are joining via phone, which actually says, unless otherwise required by law or court order. Oh, excuse me, this is related to the immigration status. Unless otherwise required by law or court order, no officer of the city of Tukwila shall stop, search, arrest, detain, or continue to detain a person based on any administrative or civil immigration detainer request unless accompanied by a valid criminal warrant issued by a judge or magistrate.
I think there's a part two to the question about to be asked.
Yes.
So
So feel free to ask your question in the chat.
never mind.
Okay. So for those that, I realize that being recorded in a session like this may make some people uncomfortable. Always feel free to contact me or any of our administration or anybody in the department actually with your questions. I'll make myself available if you'd like a little bit more private setting in order for us to have a conversation. I'd gladly take a call or meet with you in person. Are SROs required to come to schools in uniform? No, they're not required to come to school in uniform. We have dressed down version that are more of a business attire where they might wear khakis or what we call BDUs, pants with pockets and such for training, and like an IZOD, professional looking short sleeve collared shirt. I've seen sometimes they've got printed t-shirts related to training and such. Usually what dictates what they're wearing, aside from personal preference, is the function of what their duties are for that day. If they have other responsibilities, they're going to take them outside of the school. More often than not, they're going to be wearing a uniform. If their duties are solely focused on the school that day, then they may wear a little bit more of a dressed down version. But they're not required to wear the uniform. They can wear and I understand the question coming from some of the concerns that came up as uniforms can be intimidating to the youth. So we can dress down. However, I would still personally like to see a mix of when they're coming in uniform and not in uniform, in full uniform, because that is part of the relationship building and acclimatization of somebody towards seeing and engaging with an officer. Because most of the time, officers are going to be in full uniform when you see them. And so understanding that there's a person, a human behind the uniform comes with engaging them and having conversations with them. And what we've seen over the years is the uniform, once you've built that relationship up with the officer, the uniform is no longer intimidating. It is no longer an interference with being able to serve that student. They don't think twice about it. they see Officer Shutt, they see Officer Tran, and it's their friend. So initially, especially for those that have concerns about law enforcement, refugee and immigrant population that are coming from countries where you didn't trust law enforcement, it is a stigma. But that's part of us exploring those ways for us to build those relationships so that we can build that trust with them so that it's no longer scary for them. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Is there anybody that wants to vocalize on the video?
Yeah, could you speak a little bit about residential burglaries? How many there were in 2020? How many were solved? What we're doing in the way of proactive patrols to maybe curb that? How do we go about solving more of these residential burglaries? For the ones that are slow to get solved, what are we doing to improve customer service with the victims that are trying to communicate with the police department? Can you touch on a couple of those?
I can. I'm looking to see if I can pull up my document that would have those stats real quick. So I've got it right here. Let me see, and I can share. Hopefully, I'm not as familiar with Zoom, but let me see what I can do to. Here we go. So, Vic, I apologize. Do I have the ability to share my screen? Yes, I do. Let's see. Oh, can you provide sharing administrative rights, Vic?
I can give it a shot.
That's fine. Let's just move on. So what I was hoping to show is our annual report, which we're just about ready to present to council, which has our statistics for 2020. So as it relates to burglary, and this is all burglaries, it doesn't break it down into residential versus commercial, but it gives you an idea. In 2020, we had 223 burglaries. Now, I do know that the majority of that is commercial. So I've taken a note and we can post some information regarding as we can go and break down the actual residential burglaries versus commercial burglaries so I can get that information for you. But being able to answer a question for what are we doing to reduce them? What are we doing to better serve the victims? Excuse me, the victims of these crimes. So beginning with serving the victims, we just hired a new victim advocate. So prior to our prior advocate leaving earlier this year, she was a domestic violence victim advocate and worked closely with the courts and our victims of domestic violence. We decided we need to branch out more so we could address concerns exactly that you've brought up. And we've created a victim advocate position instead. So this person actually starts here in July, the beginning of July, and they will be meeting the needs of all victims here in Tukwila. Now, the primary function of that individual is going to be seeing to the needs of victims of violent crimes, domestic violence, individuals that were potentially the subject of a residential burglary where the family was at home when it happened, because there's going to be more trauma for somebody that was at home at the time of a burglary versus when they come home and find that they've been burglarized. But we're looking to explore ways to broaden our victim advocacy so we can meet those specific needs. I don't know how the police department can do a better job of preventing burglaries from happening, aside from educating the community about how to best protect themselves and make their house a less of a target. So along that mindset, I've asked our major crimes division to put together some community or public service announcements and or trainings that we can post on social media, some short videos and or PowerPoint, some way of relaying information that would help individuals secure their house, make them less of a target for residential burglaries. Because most burglaries happen as a means of opportunity. In other words, somebody drive by, they see a door open, a garage open, or they recognize the pattern of somebody when they are no longer at home. So finding ways to do some crime prevention and creating ways for community to watch out for each other, block watch programs are the best way really to combat residential burglaries. If you have all of your neighbors watching out for one another and you're all familiar with one another, so you know who's supposed to be at what house and who's not supposed to be at a house, that provides the opportunity for knowledge that would then lead towards being able to catch burglars in the process and keep them from vandalizing homes and doing that. Lynn, did that adequately address your question?
Well, considering my crime isn't solved, I probably will never get that itch scratched, and I will be probably kind of disappointed because you're kind of and I get it. You're saying the police don't have the resources, and you're kind of on your own. I mean, I'm kind of hearing that, and so I guess if you guys get the word out, that obviously would be good. That if you grew up in a town where the police used to do proactive patrols versus responsive to 911, or for those of us that had been to the Tukwila Police Academy, it had certain expectations, and then somehow the performance of and the priorities of the police department have changed since you have been in the police academy. That would be good, because then citizens would be aware that you need to armor up a little bit, or look for a different community. You know, like I said, you look for a community different, not because the police department, but because the people around you, we're not in that mode of looking after each other. And so that's what you're kind of telling me. So,
well, I'm going to correct you a little bit here. That's not what I meant to say. So if that's how you took it, I apologize. So we're not saying we don't have the resources. We are limited on resources right now, but if we had a full complement of staff right now, we still would not be able to catch burglars in the process, because this is what happens when burglars are staking out a house. Even if you have regular patrols in the area, which, by the way, we've directed our patrol officers to conduct more patrols. During the course of their shift, they should be going down every street within their district. Our officers work a 12-hour shift. We're 9 square miles. At any given time, there's at least 5 officers working on a patrol beat, in which case, dividing the city up that way over a 12-hour period, they should be able to do patrols that cover virtually the entire city. We need to be proactive. We've had discussions about proactive. We are not shying away from proactive activity. As resources allow, we do the activity beyond just for calls. We are not just responding to calls. And as it relates to having our community members, my message was not intended to be look out for yourself. My intent was partner with the police department so that we can help meet those needs. The only way to catch a burglar truly is either in the process of them doing it, which is going to take somebody calling and reporting it. And that's what I meant by neighbors banding together to watch, in which case police can then engage. We can get there. Tukwila has some of the fastest response times in the state, because we are such a small jurisdiction or geographic area, yet we have 150,000 plus here during non-COVID times for retail business and industrial. We have a huge population, therefore we get large population problems for a small community. But the nice thing about being a small community is you have access to your police department like this. And you know, I feel a little bit disappointed that the police department has given you an impression that we can't do anything for you. So my goal is to help change that perception of us. So I'll make myself available. I will make our detectives available for coming up with ways for us to address your problem. And if you would, when we're done, if I could get your information and contact information so I can find out what case you are referencing, so that I can find out why nothing's been able to be done about your particular incident. After the fact, after your home's been burglarized, there's also other ways for us to track down individuals involved with burglary, because if they've stolen something, they need to sell it. And they usually try doing it through the pawn shops, Craigslist, OfferUp, and we have means for investigating that as well. It depends on the property and how unique it is and whether or not we can identify it, but we should be able to see what we can do to address your concern. Again, not being familiar with what it is or how long ago it was, I'd appreciate the opportunity to give us a chance to look at it.
And another thing we've done really quick is we joined that Neighbors app program. So that gives us the ability, if we do say have a burglary, we can post immediately. You know, we responded to burglary in this area. I can set essentially a net in a certain radius around that burglary. Anybody with cameras that's part of that program, doesn't matter if they're Ring cameras, Arlo, Nest, anybody that's part of that app can give us footage from whatever time that we're seeking. So if you had a burglary at 6 p.m. on Friday, we put a post out, we're seeking footage from 6 p.m. on Friday within this radius. And that helps us piece together these cases too. So now we can see cars coming and going, anything you guys share with us. Des Moines had, I don't know if you guys remember last year, there was a serial brake cutter. It's cutting brake lines in the area. They were able to use that program to piece together all these different cases into a much bigger case than just one incident. So that's another way we're leveraging technology to help with that as well.
We've got some messages. So Lynn, providing an opportunity for some others on the chat here, I would like an opportunity to address your specific concerns here at a later time. We live on a dead-end street, 2 streets north of Foster, and I'm very grateful when we see an officer venturing into our little cul-de-sac. Hopefully you'll see them more. And not only just see them, hopefully they'll be engaging with you and talking with you. So again, we can find out how we can best meet your needs. Bev, to everyone, I'm very thankful when we see you driving through the loop. Are residential cameras an effective prevention tool for residential burglaries? Yes. So if there is a network of cameras and or readily identifiable cameras, you're making your house less of an opportunity for an individual looking to vandalize and or burglarize, because it's much easier to hit a house that doesn't have a camera, doesn't have an alarm system. So not only having the camera system, but making it blatantly apparent that you've got a camera system, have an alarm system, a sign up indicating that these premises are monitored by video surveillance. Those things do deter crime. They don't deter everybody, but they're more likely to go to an easier target than to a house that has video surveillance and alarms, and or other means for deterring criminals.
Chief, can I jump in on Lynn's question about burglaries? I think something that we're working on right now is we are almost done. There's a company called Found Drop. So found and then ROP, so Found Drop's kind of one word. And the cool thing for citizens is it allows you to inventory your valuables, you know, put in serial numbers. You can have it saved. And if your house is burglarized, you know, you can get that stuff to us right away. And then if it shows up anywhere in the country for company or police departments that use the program we use called File on Queue, you'll get a notification that your stuff's been found. We'll put out more information when we get that thing going. It's pretty close to being set up. You know, what the chief mentioned is we have to sometimes we can find people that steal or sell your stuff. We've solved a lot of cases when somebody pawns off stolen items. That's a huge help for us in solving those crimes, is if we can find some of that property that was stolen. And then one other thing is, I get this a lot, is people say to me, I didn't know if I should call 911. And I always try to encourage people, always call. If something doesn't look right, call us. We'll come out and deal with it. And if it's nothing, then it's nothing. There still seems to be some people that are, you know, gosh, I don't know if I should bother you guys. Yes, you should bother us. Always, you should bother us. So I know it doesn't help you with your crime, but, you know, moving forward, hopefully these are a couple of things that can help us arrest people or hold people accountable later on down the road.
I don't see any other questions in the chat forum. Anything else from the group as a whole? You have us as long as you want us. So if you've got questions at this point, just speak up.
So this is Kathy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is an issue anymore, but 2011, let's say, so that's 10 years ago now. It was, and that is calling 911 to have the officers validate what you're saying instead of pushing back. And I don't know if that has, this is the officer being the 911 people. Because I think people are, well, I know that there are people that have asked me to call 911 for them because they've been intimidated by somebody on the 911 line. And so, and if that happened, I just wanted to leave it out there for people that if that happens to them, I would let the police department know so that you can kind of figure out what actually went on there. It could be that it was a really stressful situation for the 911 officer too, or I don't really know how that works. But I hate to think that people aren't calling 911 because they are concerned with the kind of reception that they're going to get. And if so, to talk to you, because I know that the Tukwila police can communicate with the 911 dispatchers and let them know the kinds of needs that we have for our community.
Yeah, so directly related to that, so Valley Communications is our dispatch center, and they dispatch for several agencies in the area. And Tukwila is a owner agency, partner agency with Valleycom. And so we sit on their board. And matter of fact, next week, Thursday of next week, I have a Valleycom Communications Center board meeting with them there. And I believe the issue you're talking about, Kathy, has been addressed. However, I will bring it up at the board meeting to make sure that it was brought, I'll mention that it was brought up in a community meeting. And they have expectations for their dispatchers as well. And they should be providing, and our expectation of them is that they are providing a level of customer service that we would want for our own families, right? So if our family member were to call and get dispatched, however they would treat our own family members, that's how we want them treating the individuals. That's the expectation we've given to our officers. Provide the level of service that you would want for your own family. How can I come to another jurisdiction and serve here and provide a level of service if I don't know that, or if I can't expect that from my home jurisdiction? right? So I want to provide the same level here that I would expect for my own family, because the only way I can be confident in that is by doing exactly that and providing the type of service that I would expect for my own family here for Tukwila. And that same expectation carries over to Valley Communications.
Yeah, and where I've seen it the most is not in the emergency calls. Those are pretty obvious, but it's like when trying to get a description of somebody, or you mean you couldn't see who they were or something, you know, not to say that, because people are always freaked out when they're calling 911 anyway. And so, and that incident was a couple of years ago now.
So an example, when I was brand new in 1996, part of our training is to go sit up at Valleycom and put on the headsets and listen to when call receivers take a call. So one thing I didn't realize is when they're asking you questions, they're usually sending that information right away to the dispatcher. So sometimes they're trying to multitask. Some people are better at that than others. And so sometimes it comes off as rude, or they're not listening to you, but they try to get us the information as fast as they can. So it was, obviously we can't do that now with COVID, but if you ever have the opportunity to do a ride along with a dispatcher or a call receiver, it's very enlightening. They have a tough job and they answer thousands of calls. And so I've called 911 myself as a citizen, and I understand what you're saying because I've felt that way too, but I get it. Not that there's not room for improvement, but it's a tough job and sometimes it just comes off wrong.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of PR for Valleycom too, because like I said, they start asking you questions. They have a list and they do it in a certain order. So if it sounds a little bit curt or something, that a lot of that is that they're ratcheting down the list of things that they're supposed to do. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Eric, and that needs, and our community needs to realize that as well, that there's protocol, and we're talking about emergencies and a lot of times lives and everything. So that's one of the reasons sometimes it comes across more abruptly than maybe you'd want it to. So there's that side of it too.
Thank you. So I see a comment in the section. I found that frustrating is trying to convince a Washington State Patrol operator that you are in the city and they refuse to send you to Valleycom. Do cell phones still go to WSP first? I don't know the answer to the cell phone question. Usually it recognizes the geocode and should send you to the location that of the jurisdiction you're within. However, some phones, starting to get into the tech behind it, are using VPNs that actually mimic a different location. So the phone should go to the jurisdiction that you are currently in. However, I think WSP becomes the default if it cannot identify your location. I do want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that we have also, during the course of our conversation so far, had Council Member Deshaun Quinn join us. So thank you, Deshaun, for joining us. Well, I truly appreciate, oh, thank you, Deshaun. I truly appreciate engaging us at this level and being able to have these types of conversations. Do challenge us as some of you have, and rightfully so. If you've had a crime committed against you, that's a violation. You know, that's traumatizing. And when a law enforcement agency isn't giving you the service that you would expect, you have a right to be frustrated. So all I'm asking is, we are currently in the middle of so many changes, new leadership, new reform, just new employees, new staff. Provide us a little bit of an opportunity to meet your needs. And that begins with telling us how we're making mistakes, telling us how we can do better. We always enjoy it when somebody tells us how well we're doing, which I hear quite often for all of our officers. However, where we truly grow is when people are willing to engage us on the conversation and the level and challenge us to be better, which we as an organization are doing. I truly have absolutely faith in the leadership here at the police department. I have faith in our council and our mayor's office and the city administration to help guide us in meeting what the community wants and needs. So it does take time. However, it's one piece at a time. And so we will address things as they occur. We will do our best to identify and anticipate the needs of the community and or trends in crimes as they come up so that we can prevent it. And when we can't, we will do our best to respond in the most professional manner that that truly is representative of the city's core values, which is caring, professional, and responsive. The department itself, as we find out from the community how we can meet your needs, we'll then put together a 5-year strategic plan committee to put together a plan on how we can achieve those goals over the next 5 years. And it's going to take the involvement of the community of telling us exactly how you want your police department to engage. We've made some assumptions. A lot we've made changes based upon what we've heard. But now's the time more than ever, especially given the state of perception about law enforcement across this nation. Now more than ever, we need your help in telling us exactly on how we can best meet your needs. I'd like to think that we are already doing a fantastic job for you. However, there's always room for improvement. And we don't know unless you tell us. So letting us know that you're unhappy is okay, because we will do what we can to then do it the way that best meets your needs. Any more questions? No? Well, if not, city officials, thank you for joining us. Community, thank you for your questions. And for those that were willing to challenge us, thank you even more so, because again, that's how we improve. I wish you the best. We'll be doing more of this. I am available. Send me an email. All of my emails come with my cell phone, replies come with my cell phone number on it, and please use it. You can contact me directly whenever you have a question. I wish you the best of nights. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night, everybody.